Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Knowledge Portal video series. So today we'll have a very high level overview about Docker platform. Now Docker as a technology has been gaining a huge popularity among today's industry because of some amazing features that it offers. And this is the reason why having a knowledge about Docker is very important. So let's go ahead and understand more about Docker. So in a very simple terms, Docker is an open platform. So once we build a Docker container, we can run it anywhere. And this is one of the main or amazing features of a Docker. So let's assume we build a Docker container. So we can actually run it on different platforms. It can be Windows, it can be Linux, it can be Mac. It can actually run on laptop, data center, or it in cloud. So it follows a approach called as build once, run anywhere approach. So once you build a Docker container, that container can actually run anywhere, from your laptop running Windows to your server running Linux. So it does not really matter the underlying platform. Now I'll share you one of the real world use case scenario, because we used to run CentOS in production. So our CentOS in production was based on 6.0, and our CentOS in development environment was based on 6.3. So we earlier thought that it will not create a huge problem because only the minor version was different. So we went ahead and we tested everything in the development environment and things were working perfectly. But till the time we deployed it in production, everything broke. Our entire website went down. And this is one of the big challenges. Here we are just considering a minor version difference in a CentOS. But when you talk about running that same application in Ubuntu, or even running that same application in Windows or Mac, that is like, it goes beyond imagination. And this is what Docker really fulfills. And most of the applications now, they are built on top of Docker container. So what happens in deployment process is you actually take that working Docker container from development environment to staging, and from staging to production, and it is guaranteed to work perfectly. So this is the good thing about Docker containers. Now, many of you might wonder, like, what is the difference between a Docker containers and virtual machines? Because till now we have been working on virtualization like VMware or KVM or Xen, etc. So when you talk about a virtual machine, a VM contains an entire operating system. And this is actually good, but this is actually not good as well. So we'll look into it. Container uses resources of the host operating system. So when you look into difference between a container and a VM, so on the right hand side you have a server, and on server you have some kind of operating system. You can have Windows, you can have Linux as well. On operating system, what you do is you install a Docker container, and then you have a container application. So what these container applications can do is they can use the underlying operating system's resource. And this is the beauty. And when you talk about a normal virtual machine, you have the host operating system. On top of host operating system, you have to install some kind of a hypervisor. It can be a VMware or a KVM or Hyper-V, etc. And on top of hypervisor, we have to install the entire operating system again. So even if the host OS, let's assume, is CentOS, if you're using a virtual machine, you again have to install the CentOS VM. So you have host as CentOS, you have virtual machine also as CentOS. So you see there are a lot of redundancy which is happening. And on top of that guest CentOS, then you have your binaries and libraries, and then you have your application. However, when you talk about Docker, you directly have your binaries and libraries and your application. So you don't really have to install this piece of guest operating system. So this is a major one. And since you don't have to install this guest operating system piece, you can have a lot of benefits. So let me show you some of the examples on how that would work. So I have my Windows machine. So this is my Windows machine. And on Windows machine, I have a container. So this is a Docker container, which is based on CentOS 6 operating system. So if you will see, let me connect to this Docker container. The name is very interesting. So now you see what happened was, earlier I had C drive user Zeal. So this was typically a Windows kind of area. But as soon as I logged into my CentOS 6 based Docker container, you see I am presented with a root like environment. So if I do a ls, it is very similar to a traditional Linux virtual machine itself. I can actually run all the Linux command, and this is actually a Linux virtual machine. So if you see proc CPU info, these are all the Linux commands that work perfectly because this is a Linux container. Now the difference between this is, now if you go to boot, you see I don't really have a kernel over here. There is no kernel. So from that I mean there is no guest operating system over here. So this part is omitted. And this actually creates a lot of issue, like it requires additional RAM, additional CPU, etc. So that part is not present in Docker. And when you talk about a normal virtualization environment, you will see over here that I have given it a 2.5 GB RAM, so many processors, and the size of this operating system itself is around 2 to 3 GB. However, when you talk about the size of a Docker container, let me show you. If I do a Docker PS, let's do a Docker images. I have an image of CentOS which I have downloaded. The size is like 194 MB only. And this is a very nice feature. So what really happens is, you log into your Docker container, you build your entire application in the Docker container. Once your application is built, you take this Docker container and you put it anywhere. You put it in Windows machine, you put it in Linux server, you could put it in Mac, and this Docker container will work perfectly as it is working right now. Okay, so this is the advantage of Docker containers. So along with this, I'll show you. So this is the official Docker website. If you go a bit down, you see Docker is supported for following platforms. You have Mac, you have Windows, you have CentOS, Fedora, Oracle, RHEL, you have Ubuntu, and various others. So this is about Docker. And one interesting thing that I would like to show you is the Docker Hub. So Docker Hub is one of the places where you can get ready-made images. For example, I have taken example of Nagios. So Nagios is a monitoring tool. Now in a normal environment, what you have to do is you have to install Nagios, you have to do all the configuration. But in the Docker Hub, people who have already written Nagios, they put their Docker container image online. So if you'll see over here, this is the entire Docker container image. So all you have to do is you have to download the Docker container and you have to run it, and everything, you'll have the entire Nagios setup up and running without even have to do anything. And this is the beauty about Docker Hub. So in Docker Hub, you will actually get a lot of ready-made images. So if you want to configure an application, all you have to do is just search in Docker Hub. If someone have put that application container, download a container and run the container, and your entire application will be up and running. So this is the beauty about Docker. In the next lecture, we'll look into how we can install Docker, and we'll look into how we can do various kind of configurations in and around Docker. So this is it about this lecture. I hope this has been informative for you, and I look forward to see you in the next lecture.